Hey, good morning, everybody. This is First Warn Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Brad Penovich. Here's an update on Maria. Some subtle shifts to the west have continued in the model guidance, which means the Outer Banks are going to be a little bit more at threat for some tropical storm force conditions, at least by Wednesday, maybe even Tuesday, depending on how big the wind field gets. Still doesn't look like a landfall in the Carolinas, but certainly direct impacts on the Outer Banks are increasing. Let me show you the latest look. We'll show you what it looks like right here on the, this is the GOES 16 satellite, and you can see the center of circulation right there. Got some dry air that's been trying to wrap around into the east and southeast side, but notice that the core of the hurricane is still pretty well intact. In fact, it actually looks pretty well organized here. As you can see, the eye pretty wide and ragged, but still it's got an eye, which means it's got some pretty good strength to it. There are some what we call southwesterly shear impacting it a little bit, but that's actually starting to relax a little bit, and we might see some maintaining of strength, maybe even a little bit of strengthening in the next 24 hours, but there's other factors that are going to deter significant strengthening. Now, we're waiting for the 11 a.m. update, but here was the forecast track from this morning, and you can see there was a shift to the west with the track, and just to give you an indication, this is the general location around 2 a.m. on the 27th. That's going out basically to Wednesday, and then we go into Thursday. You could see at 2 a.m. So we're getting into that time frame there, basically going into Wednesday, Thursday, where it's going to be somewhere off the coast of the Carolinas. But notice the Outer Banks are solidly in the cone. Remember, the storm could be here or here. It's going to be somewhere in this area, and I think we might see a shift to the west a little bit more later today. Let me throw you the wind fields on here real quickly just to show you the probabilities of tropical storm force winds. And if you look carefully at the Outer Banks, you're getting into that. This is the 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50% probability at Hatteras. So, you're starting to see the probabilities, at least a tropical storm impact somewhere there. Let me show you the models real quickly there, just to show you that they're starting to see that shift back to the west. And I'm going to throw them on here real quickly for Maria, and we'll plot them on top here. And you can see the models are still generally offshore, but if you look at the clustering of these models, there's a clustering a little bit closer to here as opposed to here. So not a lot of landfalls. Those are outliers, just like these are outliers, but I think you're going to see a shift somewhere in this area right in here. And again, the exact track probably not as important as the impacts as they spread off to the west, just to show you that trend in the models. This is a look at the GFS trends, and if you look from lighter color to darker color, these are the older runs. Each run is shifted a little bit further to the west, but in this last run, which was at 6Z, you notice it's somewhere in between. So there's been a shift to the west or to the left in the GFS models, and even in the European model, we've seen a shift to the west, and actually it shifted a little bit further west. You can see this black line, that's the latest run. The last two runs were over in here. So there's definitely a trend towards the west with this guidance. So we'll have to keep an eye on this as the update comes in. I think we're going to see especially closer to the Carolinas, we might see a subtle shift back to the west. But notice everything is still eventually recurving away from the coast. It's just getting closer to the Outer Banks before it makes that turn. So if it makes the turn like that, or it could make the turn like this, or there's still a possibility it could be over in here, but the air is definitely back in this direction. So if you live in the Outer Banks or eastern North Carolina, even the Tidewater region, Delmarva Peninsula, this is a storm you still got to watch very, very carefully. We'll show you the steering currents in the atmosphere. You can see what's going on here. First of all, you can see our storm, which is right here. This is the remnants of Jose, and we've got a little low in here. Like right in here, you can kind of see it. This is kind of backing off in this direction. I think that's why you're going to see a little tug back to the west, because the counterclockwise spin with this is actually going to help kind of pull it towards the coast a little bit as it comes up here, but then it peels away and a bigger trough, a dip in the jet stream like this, develops. So this little thing is going to tug it back to the west before it goes like this. So this thing is becoming a big, big part of how this thing is going to get steered to the west a little bit more. The remnants of Jose, if it were to hang out a little bit closer up here, it actually would help pull it up this way, but it looks like it's going to be exiting quickly enough that this low here, because of the spin, remember, these things are spinning like this, so as this gets closer, its natural tendency is to want to get hooked in a little bit until the bigger spin in the atmosphere like this eventually kicks it off. That's why you're seeing this wobble back to the west. So the general trend is like this. It's an S curve essentially. The problem is that little part of the S which buckles out is getting very, very close to the Carolina coast. So I think we're going to see the potential for at least some significant, I wouldn't say significant, but direct impacts. Now, here's the one caveat in all of this. We've got some cooler water. This is what we call the model diagnostic. So it shows you intensity, the track, but it also shows you how shear and sea surface temperature, that's what's SST, that's basically the water temperature. And if you look carefully, the line is where we are right now. So you can see right now, we've got a lot of wind shear and pretty warm water. But as we go through time, the wind shear relaxes a little bit, but then it starts to come back up. But the one thing that's consistent, the water temperature drops considerably through time. So as the storm gets up into this area, while it could get closer to the Carolinas, it's actually going to weaken pretty significantly. And I think it could significantly weaken to maybe a weak tropical or weak hurricane or a strong tropical storm. Now, the impacts don't change much, but we're not looking at the Category 3 storm that we have right now. And that's reflected in all of the guidance here. I'm going to turn off the models here just to show you. You can see the wind speeds here, 80 miles per hour, and then up here the wind speeds are 75 miles an hour. So it's a much weaker system. Here they're 100 miles per hour. Down here they're 115. So as it moves to the north, it's going to encounter cooler water in this area. Now the Gulf Stream is over in here. So if it were over there, it would stay really warm. But the water out here is cooled off because of the upwelling that was caused by Jose. So yes, there's a shift to the west in the guidance. There's no denying that. But if there's one piece of good news, as it gets closer to the Carolinas and the Outer Banks, the water is much cooler here. Wind shear will start to take over, and it's going to be a weaker storm. And you can see that in all of the guidance. So notice how the intensity forecast really drops off here through time as we get closer to Wednesday and Thursday. So even with this track closer to the coast, all indications are based on shear, based on sea surface temperature and intensity guidance that we're going to see a weaker storm overall. So there's a look at Maria. Outer Banks, I think the threat's gone up a little bit. The thing I would plan for right now, maybe some big time surf and some overwash on Highway 12, but the winds, the chance of seeing tropical storm force winds now about 50%. So that means you could see sustained winds close to about 40 miles an hour. The new update should be coming in literally any minute right now. We might see that shift to the west a little bit more. Just to real quickly show you the wind field. I've got the wind probabilities on here. You can see the wind field. This is the concentric circles you see here. Notice that the wind field is much bigger on the right side than on the west side, but this does extend out pretty far. And just to show you how far that extends out, I'll grab my... So the tropical storm force winds extend out about 121 miles to the west. The hurricane force winds only extend out about 35 miles. So if the Outer Banks get into this area within 35 miles, they might get some hurricane force winds, but it's likely it's going to be in this 30 to 40, maybe 50 mile per hour winds. Notice how much bigger the wind field is out to the right. So even with the current track and a shift to the west, be thankful this is the west side and not the east side of the storm. So we'll wait for the update to come in. I will post it on my page the second it comes in. Looks like it'll be coming in any second now. This is still the, let me look at this is still the 6Z, the morning update. So we'll wait for the afternoon update, which will be coming in any minute. Hope you have a great Saturday. Again, the time frame of this is going to be Wednesday into Thursday. Of course, I'll be tracking it and I'll post another update tomorrow as things come in.